Hi, everyone. Nice to be here. So my talk is entitled Predicting Complex Ideas in Python Using Collaborative Modeling. So I realized after coming up with this title that the first part is pretty much what data science is in general. So the focus is really on this idea of subjective or more complex political science applications for machine learning. And the ideas, so the ideas here are going to be to discuss with everyone here and get feedback on this application, specifically the use of machine learning to measure the democratic quality of political discourse. So totally different from the first talk, but interestingly enough, there's actually a lot of parallels, which you'll see. And I guess that's because of the machine learning component. And what I really wanted to talk about is this idea of getting a user base involved in order to do collaborative training in a specific area. So a little background, this is me in 2011. I picked this picture because I look really innocent, because I don't know what I'm getting into. I was doing my master's at the University of Toronto, and I didn't have a thesis topic, and I also didn't know anything about data science at the time. So I did a little bit of Googling in desperate search for a research topic, and I came across this really interesting thing called the Discourse Quality Index. So the Discourse Quality Index was a method that was invented in 2003 as a way to measure the quality of parliamentary debates. So somebody would say something, and then a whole bunch of political science researchers would take the text and manually code it. So they would say, were people free to participate? And then they would give it a code, 0 or 1. And then they would calculate how the persons justify their arguments, what they had in their justifications. Did they respect each other? Did they include the arguments of the previous speaker? And did they do constructive politics, which for political science means coming up with mediating arguments based on other people's arguments, instead of just talking about your own opinion. So it's kind of complicated, but you put all those things together and you get a quality score. So this is what the coding manual looks like for a human. So totally unusable for a machine, of course, but a human used it. And for each time a person says anything, you take out this little code book and you write a code for each line. So each indicator, and then you count everything, and you should get 14 as the maximum score. So it's between 0 and 14. So I did 2,662 comments by hand. It took a really long time. I probably made a ton of mistakes. And so I learned data science after that. This is an example. So what I was interested in is analyzing politics online. So I started by studying a town hall that happened with the Liberal Party in 2011. If you know a bit of politics, that was when they completely fell apart after the elections with Michael Ignatius, and so they had an emergency online town hall with everybody there to kind of rebuild. And so I was interested in what they were going to talk about and how they were going to have a sort of meaningful political discussion, but with comments, with online comments. So I did that, and then we're going to fast forward 8 years. I continued thinking about this for 8 years, and I guess I danced a lot during that time, or fell over, I'm not sure. But basically, now the tool is called DelibAnalysis. So I thought it's kind of like sentiment analysis, because originally sentiment analysis seemed kind of complicated, positives, negatives, and then you needed to use a whole dictionary for each one. And I thought ends it's a kind of a similar concept in the sense that you have 6 indicators. You kind of need to build a model for each one, and then each one ends up having a whole collection of words and complexities. that would predict whether or not a certain speech has that indicator. Then it seems like maybe it's more complicated than sentiment analysis, so I'm not sure about that, but it's an okay analogy. So I'll get into it a little bit, but just to give you an overview, right now it's primarily a research tool that's used by research institutions in 6 universities. So the University of Pittsburgh, the Open University of Catalonia, Yale, LSC, University of Szeged, Open University of Berlin, and University of Geneva. The last one was me, actually. That was my PhD, but I still added it. So I'll talk a little bit about the use cases. I think that it's useful to kind of understand the context before we get into it in too much detail, and understand a little bit more the users. So the first example is study of parliamentary discourse in 3 parliaments in the territories of Yukon, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories. So what this researcher, Michael McKenzie, wants to know is if the parliaments have a different kind of interaction. The representatives, the MPs in the parliament, have a different kind of interaction based on the structure of their parliaments. So Nunavut is actually a consensus-based parliament, which means that they don't have any political parties. And the idea is to think, well, if they don't have any political parties, are they therefore better at making consensual decisions? Are they more respectful or less? Maybe probably more. But and just how do they speak to each other in an attempt to resolve some major issues? So that's the use case here. And I'll add a little bit more, is that using DelibAnalysis, he's able to analyze 100,000 parliamentary speeches since the creation of Nunavut. So Nunavut was created in 1999, so that's about 20 years of speeches, and comparing those speeches with the ones at a comparable time frame for Yukon and the Northwest Territories, and getting a general sense of how democracy changed over time in these different areas. And what's kind of fun is that once you have the data and you run it, and everybody here, knows that this kind of thing doesn't really take a long time to run, you can start segmenting, thinking about different topics that you might want to look at. One of the things he looked at was during the implementation of the cannabis legislation. So what were people thinking about, and how are they interacting during that legislation? So there's a lot of different things that you can zone in on relatively easily. A different example is one on social media. So this is a researcher who's interested in measuring the democratic quality on Twitter of debates for the around independence of Catalonia. So this is something that's an ongoing subject in the area, in the province, and a lot of the debates, more and more of the debates are happening online. So the researcher wants to understand, are people just shouting in the wind, or are they having a constructive online discussion about this important political issue? And finally, a really interesting use case that came up recently is, I don't know if you were aware of the Yellow Jackets movement in France, probably, but one of the negotiation items that came out of that was that the President Macron allowed or agreed with the Yellow Jackets that there would be more citizen consultation on key issues for France. And so one of those issues is climate change. And so what they did is that they started citizen conventions where they'll randomly select citizens and have them debate for several days and come up with recommendations for the government. So it's not a completely unusual thing. Actually, citizen consultations happen around the world, but specifically it was an outcome of this massive protest. And so they actually contacted me to analyze the quality of the debates there. So this is an I guess, experiment that's going on right now. So what does DelibAnalysis actually do? So at the moment, it allows researchers to train their own models using a simple framework. So they don't have to change anything other than the config file, but it is a command line run little application, kind of relatively straightforward for a data scientist, hopefully not too complex for a political scientist. And the idea is that they will manually code their training data sets the way I did, except not with 2,662, more with like a few hundred. They'll have a small representative sample, and then they'll start training models on each indicator. And hopefully they get good enough results and they can get a sense of the quality of the debates. So some of the software requirements for this. So it needs to be very interpretable, which means that a list of top features used is super, super helpful for the researchers. It has to be accurate, which of course, because they're providing their own training data, is very hard to control for me. And it has to be run by non-technical people. So right now I ask them to find a friend. So I say, okay, you have to run it in command line, you need to download a few Python packages. So if you have a friend that knows Python, it shouldn't be long for you to do. And they usually kind of stress out because they have to talk to somebody from another department, but it's good, it's good. And then the other requirement is that it can't be too out of the box. So the reason also that they have to train their own models is because they need to do research. So if you just give them a tool and it just runs it and doesn't like require any work, then there's not much to write an article or paper about. So it's kind of like an interesting requirement, but it's true. And I think that when you're doing research, you want to really be able to kind of fiddle with everything and just change stuff. And so that's why there's a config, so you can play around with it and mess around. And hopefully come up with something new. So in terms of the technical details, I was going to show the config, but now I'm really scared to touch my screen. So I'll probably circulate later the GitHub link so that people can take a look if they want. But basically the config allows you to select which indicator you're going to train the model on, whether you're going to train the model, take a trained model and just make predictions, that kind of thing. So set your source of your data, where it comes from, that kind of thing. So it's fairly straightforward. It uses basic text processing. So the vectorization right now that we have in terms of the methods are word engrams, part of speech engrams. So between 2 and 3 parts of speech or words at a time, and so the possibility with time of inserting your own vocabulary. So maybe you trained your model a bunch of times, and you have a sense of, particularly with respect, like what are the terms that might help your model predict respect a little bit more. So you can add those as well. You might be asking yourself why we're not yet using more up-to-date models for text processing, like even word-to-vec or transformer method or something like that. So what we're thinking, like preliminary experiments with those methods have given pretty much similar results. So we kept it simple for this version, and I think the next version will try to go a little bit more in depth, kind of squeeze out a little bit more accuracy with different ML techniques. And then the classification is the random forest model. Again, with the idea of having a highly, very simple, run locally, very fast, and very interpretable model, where the researchers get to break down every single feature that goes into it, look at it, think about it, maybe group all the features in terms of topic, and really dive into it. And it's kind of part of the research that they want to be able to do that. Also, coming in with very, very little training data, sort of traditional machine learning algorithm is performing a lot better right now. So all these people are training their own models. In the end, what I would like to do is have a more generalizable model. But as you've seen is that the training is kind of complicated and the coding is kind of complicated. So the idea here is to get people motivated enough that they're going to want to collaborate in the training of this generalized model. And that's what I thought was kind of interesting about this project, is that there's so many different steps to kind of building a community to get people to really do quite a bit of work in order to train the model. And eventually, we're starting to sign data sharing agreements to get the same data. Eventually, there might be a possibility of having a model that's generalizable enough that would be able to make predictions when we're listening to political debate online or on the media, state of the union address, things like that. So the way that I've kind of approached the collaborative training is first make the code open source, publish the paper, and then start talking about it a lot. So doing workshops, I did a lot of workshops after my PhD, so in the last year and a half. I kind of said yes every time somebody asked me to help them code, which was really beautiful. I'm really sick that I've been coding for 10 years. And by coding, I don't mean programming, I mean like manual and stuff. I sent out a lot of user surveys to figure out what they would want, then put out a better version of the software. And so now we're at this last step, which is going to be the data sharing agreement to get all the data back. So it's a win-win, I really think. I think for me, I'm sitting by myself. I'm getting a lot of user testing and I'm getting training data. And for the researchers, they get an analytical tool, they get kind of customized training, and they get to publish papers. So that's always good. I think they're into it, I'm into it. So what happens when the model is finally trained? So then I think that we can start thinking about a more general audience. So for the media, for a general public, I think these kind of questions about, I don't know, how good is our democracy really, and what are people really, our politicians, are they really democratic, or are they actually really demagogues? These kind of questions I think everyone has. And it would be great to have a way, assisted by machine learning, to be able to know that a little bit more and to have a little bit more data. I think for these questions, we listen to a lot of talking heads, and sometimes you just want to have a little bit of quantitative proof, even if there's so many issues and biases and all kinds of things associated with that. I think it would be great to have that tool out there, measuring these questions. I kind of think that eventually, once we have enough data, we can start exploring deep learning methods just for accuracy's sake. Once the model is hosted and can run somewhere on an external server, not on the researchers' laptops, then I think that exploring that would be a really interesting step forward. In terms of the outputs, it'll also have to be simplified a little bit. So for most people, this idea of the indicators with levels of justification might not really speak deeply. So is there a way to maybe make it speak to people a little bit more and just make it more relevant to people that haven't studied political science for 2 decades. And then finally, I think the access is something relatively straightforward, just the API access that would return probabilities for each element in a speech. So that's pretty much it. I kind of ran through this. Okay, actually I didn't. It's okay. It went by really fast. I had a great time. So what's the future of the research project? So I think for the research project, definitely will continue. Open source, I'm really committed to that. I'll continue giving workshops and training the community and kind of growing the community. One thing that I'm starting to think about is, and I don't have ideas, if anybody here has ideas, but how to grow an open source user community, what kind of platforms to use for questions. Is using GitHub enough in terms, and somebody's saying no, so that's no. I was thinking no also. Especially for a non-technical user base, where they want to interact and get news and communicate with each other and feel like they're part of the community. Because people end up spending a lot of time on this, maybe a year of their academic life working on this project. So that's something that I would really like to continue working on. And then potentially split off the public-facing products into kind of 2 offerings. So that would be, those are the next steps. And so that's it. So if anybody has any ideas, any questions, I would be happy to discuss. Thank you very much.